Welcome into Weather Wednesday here at New England Storm Center. So, over the past few days, we have written a lot about last Friday's tornadoes in New England at newenglandstormcenter.com, but I did want to touch on them here on Weather Wednesday. So, the National Weather Service did confirm 5 tornadoes last Friday. Uh, August 18th, 2023 becomes only the 5th day since 2009 to produce at least 5 tornadoes in New England in a single day. The strongest tornado of the day was the one that touched down in Scituate, Rhode Island. This tornado tracked for just over 9 miles, which is a pretty long path for New England. The path was discontinuous, meaning that the tornado did lift off the ground briefly over the course of the 9-mile path. The tornado was rated an EF2, a very rare EF2 plus for New England. Since 2008, this is only the 4th tornado to get up to EF2 plus strength. And there have been nearly 150 tornadoes in New England since that time. And again, only 4 now have gotten up to this strength. The last was in 2014. So this was the strongest tornado in New England in nearly a decade, and actually the strongest in Rhode Island in nearly 40 years. So the maximum winds were estimated at about 115 miles per hour. This occurred right where the tornado touched down in Scituate. The National Weather Service described the tornado damage as, quote, "There were hundreds of large trees either uprooted or snapped at their bases. One home sustained damage to its roof. The top of its chimney was blown off. Windows were blown in, and an exterior door was dislodged from its framing." Trees caused significant damage to homes and vehicles among a couple of the tornadoes that occurred on this day. The Scituate tornado moved into Johnston, Rhode Island, and crossed Interstate 295, where it picked up a car and dropped it back down again. This is really what confirmed the tornado early on. Obviously, straight line winds aren't going to pick a car up off the ground. Only a tornado will do that. The same thunderstorm that produced the Rhode Island EF2 tornado would go on to produce a second tornado in North Attleboro and Mansfield, Massachusetts, 10 minutes after the Rhode Island tornado completely dissipated. This tornado was rated an EF1 with maximum winds estimated at 90 miles per hour. This tornado also had a rather long track lasting for 7.6 miles and again was discontinuous. Interestingly enough, the Rhode Island tornado, despite having a 9-mile track, was not the longest track tornado this year in New England. In late July, I believe it was July 27th, a tornado tracked for just over 13 miles across southwest New Hampshire, and believe it or not, that track was discontinuous as well. 3 other tornadoes touched down. As you mentioned, there were a total of 5. The first one of the day was in Scotland, Connecticut. The other 2 touched down after the Rhode Island and North Attleboro tornadoes. There was an EF0 in Stoughton, Massachusetts, and a rather high-end EF1 in Weymouth, Massachusetts. That tornado had winds estimated at 110 miles per hour. EF2 strength starts at 111 miles per hour. So not only did we have an EF2, but we had a very, very high-end EF1 as well. Thankfully, despite these strong for New England tornadoes, there was only one injury. The injury was the driver of that car that was lifted off the ground on Interstate 295. They were transported to the hospital with minor injuries. So a lot of damage caused by trees falling onto houses. A lot of the structural damage occurred not from the tornado itself, but from trees falling onto houses as well as cars. So, with all that damage and these powerful for New England tornadoes, fortunately, only one injury and no deaths. So, New England's spell of blissfully dry weather will be coming to an end later this week. An area of low pressure will make its way through New England Thursday night through Friday. This will create scattered showers and storms. There is washout potential for portions of New England on Friday, particularly for southern areas. But again, it will be a showery and rainy and at times thundery day for just about all of New England. This does look like a standard rainy day, flash flooding and severe weather is not expected. Total rainfall amounts are tricky to say at this point, but it should generally be an inch or less. A stronger cold front will move through on Saturday. This will push the system out of our area, but as cold fronts tend to do, it will create scattered showers, storms, and lots of clouds for Saturday. Saturday certainly not looking like a washout. There will likely be more dry hours than wet hours. Sunday is less certain, but it looks like we will be transitioning away from the unsettled weather. Right now, maybe there'll be some showers in the morning with clearing in the afternoon, but the truth is we just need to get closer to the day to hammer down timing for the latter half of the weekend. The cool weather that we hinted at last week has arrived and is looking to stick around for a little while. Below average temperatures are favored for the rest of August and maybe into early September as well, before there are signals of a warm up for later into September. Of course, by early September, a warm up to full summer heat is unlikely under any circumstances, as average highs drop below 80 degrees by that time anyway. A few days ago, the tropics really heated up. Suddenly, there were a handful of areas of interest popping up in the Atlantic. Things have slowed down a bit here midweek. There are currently three areas of interest in the Atlantic, counting Tropical Storm Franklin. None of these systems will have an impact on the US, not anytime soon anyway. Of course, Hillary moved through the west earlier this week, and Harold moved through South Texas yesterday. Franklin will take an abrupt turn north-northwest toward the US after impacting the Dominican Republic. However, with nothing to draw the storm into the east coast, this storm should then turn back to the northeast and parallel the east coast without coming close enough to cause any direct impacts. For a storm to make landfall in New England as it parallels the east coast, we need something to pull the storm toward land, and there's nothing to do that. So Franklin will follow the main flow and stay away from land. The remnants of Emily are likely to reform into a tropical entity late this week. Of course, whether this storm reforms or not is inconsequential, as it is out in the middle of the ocean, nowhere near any land masses. An area that has moved off the coast of Africa could very slowly develop over the next week, but conditions are only marginally favorable for development. The National Hurricane Center gives the storm a 30% chance of developing in the next week as this is recorded. This storm will need to be watched, but this is a long-term system. There's also a 70% chance that an area of low pressure off Mexico's west coast will develop by this weekend in the Pacific. So, with all of that said, that is going to do it for this edition of the Weather Wednesday podcast here at New England Storm Center. So, as always, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and you will hear from me again next Wednesday.